Well, I'm back into uploading, and what better way to celebrate than more of your favorite high-grade Colombian true crime? Yes, that's right, I'm about to talk about true crime for the next 30 to 45 minutes, maybe an hour. Who knows? We're going through the first half of level 10 today, so buckle your fuckles, get cozy, send your dad to the Shadow Realm. You know, the works, the whatnot. The Short family. Now, this one does not have a Wikipedia article. Half of this video doesn't, so get ready for this. Thank you to the writers over at Unresolved for giving me this material to read. It's gonna be long-winded. So go ahead and get ready while I listen to Russian hard bass. On the evening of Wednesday, August 14th, 2002, Michael Short was with an employee of his, Chris Thompson. Chris was working together with Michael on a car of his, but would eventually return to a motel down the road where he had been staying some point after sunset. Chris Thompson was the last man to see Michael, Mary, and Jennifer Short together, and that was at approximately 11 p.m. that evening. Now, of course, they also drove through a Burger King drive-thru, so I shouldn't say that he was the last man, but he was one of the last men. This was in Collinsville. They grabbed a late summer dinner, as so quaintly put by the other writers. The family probably went to bed sometime after midnight, but the next several hours remain a mystery. Michael's employee, Chris, returned to the home just before 9 a.m. He planned to meet up with Michael and drive him to Christiansburg, where they were to pick up a truck for Michael's mobile home moving business. Very popular stuff in Carolina, I think that's where they're at. Michael had a couch in the garage where he normally fell asleep watching TV, typical dad stuff. Word has it, apparently, that Michael's snoring tended to keep Mary awake, so he slept out in the garage from time to time. Jesus, this is full of details that we don't really need. God, get to the point of the case. Officials with the Henry County Sheriff's Office were called out to the scene a short time after the arrival, where, well, the body of Michael was found in his family's carport. After doing a scope of the family's home, officials announced that another body was in the home. That of Michael's 36-year-old wife, Mary. But the third body had not been found. Missing from the scene was Short's 9-year-old daughter, Jennifer. She was nowhere to be found, so police began to reach out to the Shorts' known relatives and friends, most of whom lived in the immediate area. But none of them knew where anything that had happened to the Short family. Now, of course, after failing to track down Jennifer within a couple of hours, an Amber Alert would be issued for the missing girl the same afternoon, August 15, 2002, and that would expand well beyond the immediate vicinity of the crime. The problem was that an untold amount of time had passed between the murders and the potential kidnapping, which meant it would be very hard to formulate a timeline. And in case you haven't heard me dick ride this show enough throughout the series, the first 48 hours are crucial in a crime, especially so in children. More or less the first 8 really in kidnappings. If you don't find the kid, then you're kind of fucked. Now, searches would be carried out throughout the next few days, but guess what? Nothing. No trace of Jennifer, and her status as a missing child would remain unchanged for quite some time. I personally don't know if it changes, but let's go ahead and say no, it probably doesn't. Keep it real, Chief. Now, of course, Michael's body, the way that it was found, was outside in the family's attached enclosed garage, laying on a couch. Now, if you recall, this is a spot where he often laid and watched TV. Jeez, this is good writing, but please, get to the point. I'm begging you, other person who wrote this. The body of Mary Short, meanwhile, was found lying in the couple's bed inside their home. Surprise, surprise. There was no sign of any struggle, and that indicated that both Michael and Mary had been killed in their sleep, with the killer using a single small-caliber weapon to kill both at some point between midnight and 9 a.m. Each of the bodies had been shot once in the head in a manner described by many news outlets as execution style, because, you know, we've got to make everything dramatic, including tragedy! Now, the usage of a smaller caliber firearm likely helped to avoid waking up the second victim while shooting the first. This is because, for those of you who have never shot guns, a .22 gunshot is, very quiet. You really won't hear it unless you're standing right next to it. During the original search of the home, police had been surprised to see Jennifer's bedroom empty. That really came as a surprise. You know, the kid's missing. Uh-oh, there's no body. Holy shit, the kid's missing. Although some investigators would note that her pillow was found on the floor and her bed had been moved approximately 2 inches from the usual positioning in the bedroom. Here's where shit starts to get even worse. The phone lines had been cut, which meant that the killing of Michael and Mary Short and the subsequent abduction of Jen had been a premeditated act. Now, of course, the police would keep the Shorts' home closed off to their loved ones for more than 2 weeks, carefully scanning every inch of the property for potential clues, which, this is more than most cops do in murder cases, so good on them, really. There's some things that I've read doing this series, and it's absolutely fucking astounding how inept some people are. Good job. Genuinely. Now, they found a few items in the home, which included 2 .22 shell casings found near the bodies. One in the bed, one next to Mary's body. You know, same one. One in the garage next to Michael's. A 12-gauge Winchester shotgun. Box of 12-gauge shotgun shells. .22 caliber rifle. Partial box of .22 caliber ammo. Approximately $600 in cash, which had been left on the kitchen counter. Checkbook. Computer disk, unidentified documents, and a reported note from the kitchen table, contents of which have not been revealed, likely because they weren't very useful. Police would even pull a latent impression of a message written on a window in a garage, which read, "I'm glad to see." It's unknown if this message was related to the crime or not, or maybe Michael was very excited to be seeing, as it could have been a partial message written by one of the families, but it was pulled nonetheless. Early on, it was reported Michael's dark pickup truck was missing from the home, but it was either located or accounted for, because this isn't mentioned at any point after this. Now, in the early days of the investigation, police would reveal that they were looking for a vehicle seen in the area, with Sheriff H.F. Castle telling reporters about this lead. There is a possibility of a red or dark-colored van, or truck, or pickup, so they don't really know what they're looking for, sometime prior to 9 a.m., but it's been so vague that it hasn't been any great use so far. We're hoping to develop that. Spoiler alert, they didn't! Now, of course, police theorize that Jen might have escaped from the home when her and her mother and father were shot and killed, and in the surrounding wilderness might have gotten lost or caught up in misadventure. In fact, as the development of the crime scene was unfolding, sheriff's officials insisted that there was no evidence that Jennifer was seriously injured in any way, shape, or form. You keep telling yourself that, buddy. However, when the girl hadn't turned up within a handful of hours, police began to change their tune. No fucking shit, we've already covered this. No apparent suspects would emerge in the early days of the investigation, with the person that discovered the bodies of Michael, Mary, and the disappearance of Jen, Chris Thompson, one of Michael's employees, fully cooperating with the investigators. Chris had been with the Shorts the night before their murder, so you are never gonna believe who the cops wanted to fucking nail for this shit. That's right, the easiest target, Chris. Now, because the Shorts had recently put their home up on the market, real estate records were pulled to see who had recently toured the family's home. It's unknown whether or not this led to any new leads, but investigators seem to believe whoever committed this crime might have used the property's open houses to get a good look at the home's layout. Ooh, jazz is playing on my mix right now as I desperately try to stay focused. More than a week after the bodies of Michael and Mary were discovered on August 23, 2002, their bodies were finally laid to rest with a public funeral. Unbeknownst to the public, however, police had set up cameras to film the event, hoping to pick up on any red flags or aberrant behavior by the guests. However, authorities were unable to find anything of note in the footage, with no one at the ceremony seeming to act out of the ordinary. Intriguingly, though, just a week or so later, on September 4th, authorities would exhume the body of Michael Short for additional testing. You don't get to rest, bitch. Now, of course, when this happened, many online and in the local area began to theorize that he was not the paternal father of Jennifer Short, a claim that would be half-heartedly denied by Henry County Sheriff H.F. Castle, who unexpectedly fed fuel to the theories early on by refusing to state whether or not the exhumation had been conducted to prove Michael's paternity. That's a stupid-ass theory. Whoa, guys, he didn't say that our theory was incorrect. Certainly it's right. That's a dumbass take. At the time, Sheriff Castle claimed this knowledge was integral to the investigation and refused to answer on what it was, which is a Chad move. Dig up a body, refuse to elaborate, leave, Sigma Grind said. Now, he insisted that the exhumation's primary focus was to retrieve hair samples, which in a glaring oversight had not been taken during the original autopsy. There it is, that classic police ineptitude. Later, Sheriff Castle would admit that Michael was Jennifer's father. No fucking shit. But his department's hesitancy led to a lot of baseless theories, which manifested themselves in the first widespread theory of the case, because armchair Reddit detectives are kind of fucking pricks. In the earliest days of the investigation, police would state that approximately 10 years before her murder, Mary Short had what appeared to be a stalker, someone that had repeatedly harassed her at her workplace. Now, of course, on multiple occasions, a man looking for Mary had been asked to leave her work's property, including once in 1992, the year of my sports car, when he had physically entered the plant. In that incident, he had been asked to leave by the manager, and he described the man as leaving in a white pickup truck. Okay, this really doesn't have anything to do with the case, guys. Writers, please, I'm begging. Now, of course, there was a lot of media attention focused on the missing 9-year-old girl who hadn't been seen since the evening of August 14, 2002. Through statements to the press, family members and police officials would plead with the girl's abductor to release Jennifer and let her return to her loved ones, who were conveniently dead. And they promised to care for the girl in the absence of her parents, the other loved ones, that is. Throughout Virginia's Henry County, which was undergoing significant economic downturn, just like everything in Virginia and most red states, Jennifer's disappearance became a rallying cry for citizens who all banded together in an attempt to raise awareness. Silly you, Mitch McConnell doesn't give a fuck. Not only was every street corner decorated with photos of Jennifer's toothy grin, but her neighbors and loved ones had successfully pushed her story into the consciousness of the entire region. Guess what it did? Nothing! In September of 2002, a man living about an hour south of the crime scene made a weird discovery in his front yard. A dog belonging to one Mr. Eddie Albert turned up with what appeared to be hair from a wig. Believing it to be just that, Eddie threw the hair in the trash, but the dogs would return 2 days later, on September 25th, with what at first appeared to be a turtle shell. It wasn't a turtle shell. Silly Eddie here realized that it was in fact a human skull. Police were called to Eddie's home because, "What the fuck, there's a skull in my house! What the fuck is this?" Now, this home was in Stoneville, North Carolina, a small town in Rockingham County. Eddie directed them to the skull discovered by his 2 dogs, as well as the hairless garbage from a few days prior, which he had errantly thrown away. A larger search of the area would unfold that day, eventually locating remains belonging to a child, which had been dumped near a pond along a rural road. In addition to the skull, hair, teeth, and bone fragments, these were all found under a nearby bridge, as well as part of a ribcage. But no more than a quarter of the skeleton was ever recovered. Because of the proximity to the Shorts family home, about 35 miles north, many believed that this discovery could be the remains of a 9-year-old Jennifer. However, police originally denied that these remains were a match for Jennifer, even though it seemed evident that they were. After all, the skull was, a skull of a young woman, and also happened to have a single small caliber gunshot wound to the head, which had been the same fate suffered by Michael and Mary Short. But pop off, cops. Pop off, I guess. The remains were sent off for testing and weren't officially identified for over a week. During that span, the loved ones of the victims had to fear that this is where their hopes and dreams for Jennifer's safe return came to an end. This is overly wordy, and I've said it 3 times now because I'm beating a dead horse, but please, just get to the point. This doesn't need to be a 50-fucking-minute episode, my god! Now, early on, a lot of speculation in this case surrounded the potential motivations of the unsub, why they had decided to kill everyone in the Short household, but singled out 9-year-old Jennifer Short for abduction. While this speculation remained unanswered following the discovery of Jennifer's body in September of 2002, many believed that the girl was the target, especially since she was the only victim abducted. The level of foresight into the crime, such as the unsub cutting phone lines, indicated that someone had gone through great lengths to carry this shit out. Because they had chosen to shoot and kill Jennifer's parents inside the home but didn't steal anything of note besides a fucking child, that eliminated most possible motives. So one of the few investigators that had left related to the abduction of the 9-year-old, who had died in an indeterminate amount of time between her abduction and the discovery of her body. Investigators believed that someone had previously seen or known Jennifer that might have become infatuated with the idea of her. However, Jennifer rarely strayed far from her parents and had a loving and healthy relationship with both, so a lot better than what I've got. She was known to occasionally head over to the convenience store next to the family's home, a Circle C, just a few hundred feet away, where she knew she was comfortable and she was very friendly with the staff and locals. But most of those people were all already questioned extensively in the weeks after the murders and presumably cleared. The media speculated, as it always does. There was possible theories for weeks after Jennifer's abduction, but it would seemingly become distracted in the months and years ahead, because, surprise, surprise, the media machine has to find another thing to hyper-fixate on, so that way something doesn't get stale. And thank God, we're finally in the last stretch of this. Garrison Bowman was a 66-year-old carpenter and an avid outdoorsman who became an integral part of this story in the weeks after Jennifer Short's skeletal remains were discovered under a bridge in rural Rockingham County. Originally named a material witness by authorities, Bowman had clearly become investigators' main suspect early on for several reasons. Police officials allege that Bowman had fled to Canada the day after the murders, weeks before authorities managed to find Jennifer's body. What's the reasoning, though? Anyway, days later, police would receive a call from Bowman's landlord, who said that 2 days before the murder, Bowman had mentioned paying a man in Virginia to move his mobile home, and that if he didn't follow through or return his money, he would have to kill him. This seemed to provide a clear indication that he harbored ill will towards someone in the mobile home moving industry, potentially Michael Short, whose business specialized in that very thing, despite not having a license to operate such a business, because the government has to put their fingers in not just your asshole, but also your money. Garrison Bowman's landlord then claimed that on August 15th, the date of the Short murders, he had seen Bowman with a pistol. The next day, Bowman was gone, and his trailer was nowhere to be found. It was later discovered approximately 1 mile away from where Jennifer's body was found in September of 2002, on the property of a friend that lived in the area. After receiving these phone calls from Garrison Bowman's prior landlord, police searched a piece of property belonging to the 66-year-old carpenter and discovered a map in his possession that seemed to mark a specific route to the home of Michael and Mary Short. According to some publications, an X was marked on the location of the Short family home. Now, of course, John Beasley, a friend of Garrison Bowman's, would attempt to explain away his friend's action, including his move to Canada, and Beasley claimed that Bowman had been planning to make that trip for years. He just so happened to leave it around the same time as the murders. Beasley also claimed that Bowman's trailer had not been abandoned, as had been posited by police, that he had offered to keep it on his property until the buyer from Michigan could come and pick it up. Again, it just so happened that his property was approximately 1 mile away from Jennifer Short's remains that were discovered in September of 2002. Now here's where I'm going to commentate on the author's decisions here. The author posits Garrison Bowman as the person who committed this crime, and immediately casts skepticism upon their actions when it can be explained by sheer coincidence. In case you haven't heard of Occam's razor, the most simple explanation is often the correct one. So it's always easier to assume no ill intent, and the cops, I read this part of the article, they go straight down Bowman's asshole and they find out he didn't do it. As a matter of fact, he says directly, "This is gonna fuck me over for the rest of my life unless I find the person who did it." But the media doesn't care. The cops don't care. Whoever wrote this doesn't really care about Bowman's reputation, at least. But hey, what does it matter? It's already been fucked enough. Now, a large part of the conversation about this case has been focused on Garrison Bowman between the years of 2002 and 2005. Other facets of the investigation carried on in the background, earning occasional mentions in the media coverage of the story. On July 22nd, nearly a year after the murders, the creek where Jennifer's skeletal remains was found was diverted for more evidence. Henry County Sheriff Castle said that multiple articles were recovered during the research, but declined to elaborate any further because he's on that Sigma male grind set. Discover body parts, refuse to elaborate, and then leave. He cited the unresolved nature of the case as the explanation for his silence, and a few months later, the remains, or at least what was found, of 9-year-old Jennifer was exhumed for forensic purposes. However, authorities weren't keen to reveal whether or not any additional evidence was recovered during the sweep, because, again, the sheriff is on that Sigma shit, dig up a body, refuse to elaborate, and then leave. If you recall, her father Michael's remains had similarly been exhumed. I just made that joke, whoever wrote this article. With the exhumation came additional theories that Jennifer wasn't We've already been over this! Later in December of 2003, that's the year I was born, authorities would travel to an airport in Kamloops, British Columbia, in pursuit of clues regarding a mystery woman who the News and Record of Greensboro noted might be able to shed light on the case. They're really grasping at straws at this point. So let's go ahead and skip forward to 2006. In 2006, it was announced that several members of the Henry County Sheriff's Office, the main investigative bodies looking into this case, had been indicted for corruption.
Wow, who would have ever thought the police officers were corrupt? Oh no!
Implicated was none other than the Sigma-based Chad, Sheriff H.F. Castle. So I have to remove your Sigma status, and your base status, and your Chad status, you piece of shit. Now, he had been the public face of the investigation since its inception back in 2002. Approximately a dozen officers had conspired to sell drugs and guns seized from criminals.
Wow, who would have ever thought if you trusted a bunch of untrained slackjaws with thousands of dollars worth of illegal substances, something would go wrong. It's almost like we need more time to become a cop. Holy fucking shit.
Now, of course, this
permanently damaged the integrity of the police department in the area,
but also the county's most high-profile investigation to date. Now, of course, whoops, the case is fucked. Holy shit. Everyone's gone. And then the FBI kind of half-ass slapped together a task force of, officers to go ahead and look through it. And even the ATF agent was involved. This ATF agent remains unnamed because they aren't named in the part of the article that I'm reading. Now, they would meet regularly to discuss work on the case, and they would begin pooling work on the case's file. Nearly 3,000 leads were compiled, and they would compile 7 of persons of interest over the next few years, refusing to divulge any specific info about them to the public because, again, do something, refuse to elaborate, and leave. On March 18, 2009, the FBI released several sketches to the public, including a composite sketch of the potential subject. The issue is, this composite came about 7 fucking years too late. Also included in the public release of a sketch was a sketch of a white cab flatbed body truck with wooden rails. I wonder what that sounds like. Which the FBI theorized had been made between 1998 and 2002, making it a newer model at the time of the murders. It's believed this truck was seen near the Short family home, but again, this is 7 years too late. Unfortunately, so many details of the investigation remain shielded by police officials because they refuse to elaborate and then
got arrested for fucking corruption.
We do know that the on-sub was likely familiar with the region due to the location where Jennifer's fucking body was found. This area in rural Rockingham County is not well traveled, and there is quite a bit out of the way for anyone that doesn't know it exists. While they might have happened upon this location by convenience, they likely wouldn't have felt comfortable disposing of the girl's remains unless they felt comfortable doing so. That is a terrible sentence. I've been bitching about it a lot, but this article could have been done so much faster. Hey, they didn't find the guy. That's how it ends. They didn't find the guy. And then there's some quotes about, this kid didn't want to die. Nobody wants to die. Of course not. Get desensitized to the agony of this world the same way that I have making this series. Anyways, let's end the agony and go on to the next one. The Bilo shootings. Luckily, this one isn't from a 50-minute unresolved episode, so I won't spend the next 30 fucking minutes in agonizing pain as I desperately try to compress a bunch of filler BS that didn't need to be there. Let's go ahead and talk about the Bilo shootings. This is from AP on June 7th of 1993. In Windsor, North Carolina, a man who said he was a former police officer with nothing to lose, so most former police officers, herded 6 people to the back of a grocery store, stacked them by twos, and then began shooting and stabbing. 3 people were killed and 2 people were badly hurt, and then 1 person managed to get away unscathed. Interesting. The 1 person who wasn't hurt in Sunday's attack on the Bilo grocery store was on the bottom of a stack, as said Bertie County Sheriff Wallace Perry. I don't think this guy's as cool as the other guy who I don't want to remember the name of, who was selling cocaine. Are you selling cocaine, Wallace Perry? I didn't think so, bitch. He was lucky, Perry said. He felt the trauma when the man on top of him was shot. Wow. Police said the motive was robbery, and that about $3,000 was taken. Those are bitch numbers. That's stupid. Come on, killing people is worth a lot more. The police were searching for a 20 to 30-year-old man. The attacker, armed with a .45 caliber pistol, told his captives he had nothing to lose. Okay, we've already been over this. An all-points bulletin prompted calls from police departments around the nation with information about recent firings, and Perry said former local officers had been ruled out as suspects. Police were also pursuing other leads, including a report that a small white car with Maryland plates was seen speeding north on US 17 shortly after the attack. Windsor, of course, is a northeast North Carolina town of 2,400. It's a center of commerce for surrounding farm communities, and according to the police, a gunman entered the store after it was closed at 6 p.m. Forced the six to the rear, made one tie up the others with duct tape and dog leashes taken from the shelves. And after the shootings, he placed the 6 people on the back of the floor, face down in a puddle of blood. Jasper Hardy Jr. of Edenton, who wasn't hurt, told the man he couldn't identify him. Perry said the gunman was, "I'm gonna let you live, big man." Thanks, bro. Killed were cashier Joyce Coburn Reason. Nice last name. Age 36. Of Windsor. Manager Grover Lee Cecil Jr. 47. Of Aden. And the cleaning crew member Johnny Rankins Jr. Aged 48. Of Edenton. Mrs. Reason and Cecil were shot once in the head, and Rankins was shot in the back, because fuck your spine. Cleaning crew workers Thomas E. Hardy, one of the Hardy Boys, age 48, of Edenton, and Sylvester Welch Jr., 40, of Hertford, were hospitalized in critical condition. Hardy's throat was slashed with a butcher knife, and that knife was also broken off in his back. Welch, who was shot in the back, managed to crawl to his store phone and call the police. Miss Reason, the mother of twin girls, was a frequent customer at Designer Plant Exhibit, a shop across the street from Bilo. Why is this important to the case? Anyways, they didn't catch the guy. Gunmen got away with it. Thanks, AP. The Laselle Street murders. Fuck your location wanting, bitch. Now, let's go ahead and get into it, as the most reliable, not 50 fucking minutes source that I could find was from a ad-riddled news page. So let's go ahead and just start reading. James Barker, Robert Gears, and Robert Hinson met their deaths in what is now known as one of Indiana's most fascinating unsolved cases, mostly because deaths are interesting to people now. Wow. On the 1st of December 1971, the men were found with their throats cut nearly ear to ear in separate rooms in a house of North Laselle Street, not far from 10th and Rural, on the city's east side. What city? I don't know yet. So let's just keep reading. Now, a bloody boot print and a cigar in the ashtray were one of the only two pieces of evidence that were not in the newspapers, radio, TV, or news. And there was a bloody footprint at the house, so that seems pretty interesting, right? A detective who talked to Harbison's wife confirmed she remembered her husband talking about burying a pair of boots earlier, which has some sort of meaning to the case. I am extremely discombobulated right now. I feel like I'm having a stroke. Okay, hold on. Jesus Christ. I need to read more because my reading comprehension has fallen to that of a 4th grader. Basically, I'm just gonna cut the fucking cheese, get to the goddamn mustard. There was confession letters that likely have the case solved. Retired Indianapolis homicide Captain Robert Snow, author of the book Slaughter on North Laselle, said he believes the case was solved with the discovery of 2 confession letters by the family of a man from Gibson County. A man who was missing a pair of boots, same boots that were buried. The letters were to the police and the Indianapolis Star, so that's a city it took place in, Indianapolis. And they were found in a safe deposit box after Fred Robert Harbison died. He basically said he had been hired by Ted Uland, a former employer of the 2 men, to kill them. He He also said that he had left a bloody footprint in the house. He knew he had, so when he got back down to Jasper, he buried his boots. Same guy that was talking about burying boots, bloody footprint. It's like poetry, it rhymes. The Payless murders. The last one without a Wikipedia article, I think. I'm not going to fact check myself on that, so if I'm wrong, make sure to comment, "You stupid piece of shit. How dare you be such a stupid piece of shit." That was a bad joke. Anyway, luckily this one is on Reddit, and I guess Redditors know how to compose articles in a manner that doesn't give me a fucking stroke. So, let's go ahead and start talking about California's unsolved triple homicide. On February 4th, 1979, there was a busy Sunday for the employees of the Payless drugstore in downtown San Mateo, California. Wait, there's Payless drugstores? I thought there was a fucking shoe shop. A small city just south of San Francisco. The store had advertised their popular Dollar Days promotion, and sales were brisk because we all love money! The store closed at 7 p.m. Doors were locked, and the security guard made his rounds. 3 employees stayed behind the empty registers to perform regular closing chores. The most senior employee present was a 24-year-old Michael Olson. He was not supposed to work that day, but had agreed to cover another employee's shift. Michael had been with the Payless chain since he was in his teens, gradually working his way up from part-time box bailer to his current position as a merchandise manager at the San Mateo location. The promotion had come just 4 months earlier. Now, we get a little bit of information about Michael's personal life. He had a wife, look at this guy. He liked to hike, look at this guy. And he knew how to draw, look at this guy. And he drew plans for a dream cabin. Well, hate to break it to you, buddy, but you're dead. You're done. Assisting Michael on the closing shift was 16-year-old Tracy Anderson, a junior at local Hillside High School. Tracy was an avid sailor who enjoyed guitar and running and is also dead. William Billy Baumgartner, nice, had also been hired for the Christmas rush and was proud when the store offered to keep him on in the new year, especially since they had entrusted him to help with closing of the registers and depositing the day's cash in the upstairs safe. The 17-year-old had recently moved with his family from Montana and is dead. At 7:32 p.m., the last cash register was closed. Michael and Billy took the day's receipts up to the locked accounting office on the second floor. Tracy stayed downstairs. By 8 p.m. that evening, a small group was congregating in the Payless parking lot. They were members of the night crew who came in after hours to clean and restock the shelves. There was just one problem. The doors were locked, and no one inside was responding. Someone went to a nearby payphone and called the store, but there was no answer. Eventually, 2 employees drove to get a spare key from the manager and returned to the store. Upon entering, the workers discovered the lights were still on inside, and nothing seemed disturbed. Things were described as quiet. At approximately 9:30 p.m., San Mateo police were dispatched to a robbery in progress at the Payless drugstore on Corkin Drive. The first officers to arrive were greeted by a small group of shocked and terrified employees. Upstairs in the accounting office lay their colleagues, Michael Olson and Billy Baumgartner, in a sea of blood. Both had been shot in the back of the head. One half of the double safe lay open. Rolls of pennies were strewn on the floor. Downstairs on the stockroom floor, Tracy Anderson was on his back, moaning with an iron stake he had apparently picked up to defend himself. He had also been shot in the back of the head. Michael showed no signs of life, but when paramedics examined Billy, they detected a very faint heartbeat. Despite their best efforts, the resuscitation attempts failed, and Billy was pronounced dead on the scene at 10:08 p.m. Michael's death was confirmed at 10:16 p.m. Meanwhile, an officer rode in an ambulance with Tracy in the hopes he could identify the killer, but the officer had no luck communicating with someone whose brain had just been blown out, and at the hospital, Tracy was declared brain dead. He passed away at 11:42 p.m. with his family at his side. The execution-style triple homicide of Michael Olson, Tracy Anderson, and Billy Baumgartner was quickly dubbed the Payless murders. And all the victims couldn't say less. I'm gonna kill myself for that joke. San Mateo police considered it the most heinous crime their city had ever witnessed. and they were yet to know, but the investigation was going to span 4 years and counting. Now, of course, we could come up with a motive, a suspect, but there's no smoking gun, and the case remains unsolved, so Reddit armchair detectiving, it's not going to do much. So what you need to know is that the killer got away with it, the killer was never identified, and even though there's some weird things of note, there's nothing to catch anybody. But here's where I'm going to posit a personal theory that I noticed while reading in the comments of this. If you've been watching this series from the beginning, which a lot of you probably have, in the sea of fucking abominable murders and despicable actions, you might remember the Lane Bryant shootings and the yogurt shop murders, which is, well, robberies of businesses that had similar types of killings. Employees put somewhere where they could be maintained and then shot in the back of the head. So that's good to know. The Rainbow Maniac. Oh boy, that's a fun name. This should be very fun to read about. These cases are officially known as the Payless Park murders, and they are a series of 13 murders, unlucky number, bad number, of gay men committed between February 2007 and August 2008. The murders took place in Payless Park, Parque dos Patrulhas, in Carapicapubia, Brazil, and were perpetrated by an unidentified serial killer who had been dubbed the Rainbow Maniac. Now, I wonder why he was called the Rainbow Maniac. Definitely doesn't have anything to do with killing gay people. The killings took place between February 2007 and August 2008, as I've already said. The victims were all gay men, as I've already said, and were aged between 20 to 40. All but one was shot. 12 of them were shot in the head. One died from blows to the head, and the last victim was shot, 12 times. According to Brazilian media, the park is an area frequented by prostitutes. So these were probably gay prostitutes, and the police dubbed the killer Rainbow Maniac as a reference to the gay pride flag. The first murder occurred on the 4th of July, God bless America, am I right, 2007, and the last 15th of March 2009. Officials from the Sao Paulo State Public Safety Department announced that the killer could be a state police officer, because that's reassuring to hear, and as of 2008, tests are underway to see if the same gun was used in each murder. On the 10th of December 2008, police arrested a retired state police sergeant, Jairo Francisco Franco, based on witness statements implicating him in a murder which occurred the 19th of August 2008. A witness claims to have seen Mr. Franco shoot a black gay man 12 times that night. Another witness told police that Franco often visited the park to look for gay men and victims. But on August 23, 2011, Jairo Francisco Franco was released after a short trial, having been declared not guilty by the jury in 4 votes against 2. And that's all we've got on this. Sweet, short, to the point. Let's move on from such a horrific crime. Rest in peace to all those affected, and rest in piss to the fucking piece of shit that did this. Lodz gay murder. I guess last episode was planes, trains, and automobiles. This episode is just how many gay people can we kill? The Lodz gay murderer, you're never gonna believe what this guy did, is an unidentified Polish serial killer who operated in Lodz from 1988 to 1993. He murdered 7 men, all of them homosexuals. In regards to the circumstances of the crimes, from 1988 to 1993, there was a series of murders in Lodz. All victims were connected by the fact that they were homosexual people. They died in their own flats right after or during sexual intercourse, and the perpetrator stole, among other things, TVs, videos, jewelry, cash, and other items from the apartments of the murdered men. The victims died by strangling, stabbing, or being beaten to death. The murders were not planned because the instruments of the crime were objects from the victims' flats. At the turn of the 1980s and 1990s in larger cities, Polish homosexuals would cruise around looking for new social contacts. The victims of the serial killer and the circumstances around their deaths are Stefan W., age 37, murdered on June 19, 1988. The corpse was found June 27th in his apartment in Laselle Street. The perpetrator tied the victim up with a wire and then stabbed him with the knife that was found at the scene. Jacek C., aged 40. Murdered on the 30th of July, 1989, the corpse was found August 4th in his apartment at Ernst Thalmann Street, now Cardinal Stefan Wyszynski Avenue, and the perpetrator tied up the victim with a string and trouser belt, beat the victim. The victim was suffocated with a cloth that had been pushed in his mouth. Bogdan J., age 50, murdered on November 21st, 1989. The corpse was found 2 days later in his apartment at Laselle Street, stabbed with a knife during sex. Andrzej, how the fuck do you say that? Andrzej, age 41, murdered on February 25th, 1990. The corpse was found on March 5th in his apartment at Gladka Street, and he was stabbed with a knife. Jacob M., age 41, murdered on July 31st, 1990. The corpse was found on the same day in a forest near Glaunau, strangled. Jan D., age 48, murdered on February 20th, 1992. The corpse was found on the same day in his home in the Lagwinki, oh fucking Christ, Poland, why? Estate, beaten to death. And Kazimierz K., age 62, murdered on July 11, 1993. The corpse was found the next day in his apartment in Konstitution Street. The perpetrator trampled the victim and then strangled him. After the last murder, committed on July 1993, an important witness appeared. He was a homosexual who had sex with a young man named Roman. The witness met Roman the previous day where they met at Kazimierz K. apartment. When all the guests left, Roman stayed in the apartment. The following day, Kazimierz K. was found dead. The witness who brought Roman to the victim's home estate testified that he had told him a lot about himself. The young man said that he was raped by an educator from the reformatory when he was 15. He was supposedly working in the Eskimo cotton industry and lived with his mother in the area of Rzgowska Street. He was 27 years old, 1.78 meters tall, with hazel eyes and dark blonde hair, combed to the side. He also had tattoos, a dot with a left eye and a laryngeal dot on the fingers of his left hand. Wow. But nothing ever came from it, and in 2007, policemen from the Lodz archives took an interest in the murder series, which nothing has ever came of, so that's cool. Finishing off strong, we have the Jani Khel killings. On March 21st, 2021, a mass grave containing the mutilated corpses of 4 teenage boys was found by a shepherd's dog in the Jani Khel area of the Banu district, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Pakistan. As the locals, including the victims' relatives, dug up the bodies, one was found to have been beheaded, one to have been shot, and the other two to have been stoned to death. The victims were identified, and they were between 13 and 17 years old, and were fond of hunting birds and wild hares in the area. The boys had gone hunting 3 weeks before and had since disappeared until, their bodies were found. Soon after discovering the bodies, a protest sit-in started in Jani Khel on the 28th of March. About 10,000 protesters embarked on a long march from Jani Khel to Peshawar to Islamabad with the dead bodies to demand actions against militants. The local police erected hurdles on the road and used tear gas and aerial firing to stop the protesters for several hours. Manzoor Pashtun and Moshe Dawar, leaders of the Pashtun Tahafuz movement, PTM, were taken into custody by the police in Kohat and Karak, respectively, to prevent them from traveling to Banu and join the lead among the march. On the 29th of March, as protesters had reached Dame Pui in Damel, the 8-day protest was postponed after an agreement was signed with them by Mahmud Khan, the chief minister of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Wow, I sound so bad when I try and say that. Please forgive me. Now, on the 31st of May, Malik Nasib Khan, one of the tribal chiefs of Jani Khel, was assassinated by militants, which sparked another wave of protest. The protesters refused to bury the slain chieftain and vowed that they would continue the protest until the killers were punished. On 23rd of June, a protester named Wahid Khan was shot dead, and several others were injured as the police blocked the protesters from marching towards Islamabad. On the 27th of June, the tribesmen ended the 27-day protest after authorities released the 4 missing men from Jani Khel who had been victims of enforced disappearance. According to local journalists, the 4 boys had also been kidnapped during the previous year by the Taraki-Taliban Pakistan when they went hunting in a similar way, but they were freed after a video of them was released. They weren't so lucky this next time. Now, of course, there was agreement by the government. The Long March to Islamabad was postponed when the government successfully signed an agreement that the protesters, after which Manzoor Pashtun and Moshe Dawar, that the people who committed the crimes would be arrested. Of course, the protesters who had been arrested were released were released, and the protesters carried 4 dead bodies back to Jani Khel for burial. The agreement stated the government would conduct a transparent investigation into the incident and prosecute those responsible. The government would ensure peace by removing armed groups from the area. The locals would be permitted possession of weapons with a license, and their homes would not be demolished. And within 3 months, the government will conduct a review of the individuals from Jani Khel who are in government custody, and those who were found innocent will be released, while those who were found guilty will be presented before courts. The government approved a package of Rs 2.5 million for each of the victims' families. But that doesn't bring people back to life, does it? And there you have it. That was this Friday's episode of True Crime. We will be back next Monday with this high-grade Colombian good shit, so, yeah. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new here, go ahead and consider subscribing. It's completely free, and it helps me pursue my dreams. And until next time, have a wonderful time. Memento Mori.